Outputting our coverage. It's what we do.
That's all we do every Thursday
At 5:30.
College football.
Mountain West Conference.
Doesn't matter.
SEC
Is all that matters.
Nick Saban.
Is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's all. Let's start the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in to another exciting edition of the Outputting Our Coverage show. Myself, Andy, alongside co-host David. David, did anything interesting happen in college football this week? It's a pretty slow week, right?
Yeah, I think just a little bit. Maybe the biggest news article that's come out in some time off or outside of the stadium, Manti Te'o.
Let's talk about Manti Te'o.
I almost don't want to because this story just gets crazier and crazier the more you get in it. Why don't you give us a background as to what happened?
Okay, let's start from the beginning. First of all,
Manti
Te'o.
He was born.
Probably in Hawaii.
Yeah.
We can only guess from the name. Originally, he wanted to go to USC. Had a life-changing vision or something that told him to go to Notre Dame. So he's at Notre Dame. Everything's all great. Pretty under-the-radar player for, I'd say, his first 3 years.
Definitely.
I mean, people knew of him, but not really. This year, kind of a breakout season for him. Decent play by Big Ten standards, if you were to consider Notre Dame the Big Ten, which is pretty equivalent. So, decent stats there.
But he had an extra storyline.
Yes, seemingly a guy that just had a run of terrible luck this year. First of all, grandmother passing away in September.
As far as we know, 100% real.
Yeah, so that happened, and that's certainly a big blow to anyone. But apparently, according to what timeline you believe, either within a few hours or a few days of his grandmother's passing, his girlfriend, a supposed alleged woman by the name of Lanai.
I think that was her last name, Kanai Lalai.
Yeah, we're really bad with Hawaiian names, so we're just going to say the girlfriend for right now. Let's just keep it at that.
I like that.
And supposedly within a few hours to a few days of the grandmother passing, the girlfriend passes as well. And then that weekend, a game against Michigan State. Instead of attending funerals or doing any of that sort of thing, Manti Te'o plays in the game, just has a career game.
He does. It was really inspired.
Right. And after that game, Coach Brian Kelly gives the game ball not to Manti Te'o, but to Manti Te'o's alleged girlfriend.
Right. Which only muddles the story anymore. So what did we find out this week?
Okay, this week we found out no girlfriend.
Right.
Deadspin, a very interesting site to frequent. They're kind of
Inquirer-ish, maybe TMZ.
A cross between National Enquirer and legitimate sports reporting,
right.
But they come out with things that you don't find other places.
That's right.
So Deadspin investigated this. To their credit, a lot of other national sports writers just completely looked the other way on this one. Never really checked to make sure any of this was real. Turns out there are no records of the girlfriend ever existing. According to the Social Security Administration, pretty legit stuff they checked into.
Right,
the girl
Stanford University, where she was supposed to go to college,
right.
doesn't have any record of her.
Right.
And that all makes sense. Now, just to throw another layer of crazy on top of that, there is a fullback for the Arizona Cardinals and also Troy Polamalu. Now, I don't know if you've heard this part, but both of them say that even before Manti Te'o was supposedly introduced with this girl, that they met her when they were doing some charity work in Samoa.
It's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of... Somebody's lying with all of this because at one point Manti Te'o said that he's met her, and in fact, the story goes that the way they actually met was the Stanford Notre Dame game in 2009.
Right.
After that game, which Stanford won, Manti Te'o, I guess, walking out of the stadium, meets this girl, they exchange numbers, that's how they meet. That's one version of the story. Manti Te'o's... And I believe that's a version of the story that Manti actually told a newspaper reporter.
Who knows at this point?
But his story now, this week, is that it was an exclusively online relationship. They had never met in person, and that's how Manti Te'o has claimed he is the victim of a very, very clever hoax. The Notre Dame administration has jumped behind Manti Te'o in a very puzzling move to me. I'm not quite sure.
They also just slammed the doors. There's supposed reports that Notre Dame officials have told anybody working with Notre Dame, if you speak to the media, you will no longer work at Notre Dame ever again.
It's very strange to me. At this point, Manti Te'o, a former player, no eligibility left.
No.
It seems to me like the smart thing to do would just be
ties.
distance yourself. You know,
Right.
Well, why? Why on earth would you do this?
He's probably the most high-profile player that they've had since who?
I mean, a long time.
A long time.
Newt Rockne? Maybe? I don't know.
They've got to hold on to that popularity.
Yeah.
I mean, this might even be a recruiting battle.
But really, you're putting yourself and the university at a huge risk. I think the athletic director, Jack Swarbrick, who is even more powerful than most normal athletic directors. He's basically a conference commissioner.
He is.
I mean, he gets a seat at the table at all these negotiations. He's really put his job in jeopardy because he
cried for Manti Te'o
in the press, which is very weird.
That was pretty weird.
This story is just baffling.
Now, they said that she had died, and supposedly Te'o believed this, of leukemia. The troubling fact is that she contacted him again, or he or whoever this was contacted him again, saying that she had to fake her death of leukemia to get away from drug dealers. Wouldn't that be even more concerning? Oh, yeah.
I haven't heard that.
And that Manti Te'o kept talking. Supposedly, Te'o knew as of December the 26th. December the 13th, he got this other message that she had to fake her death to get away from some drug dealers. And he waited 2 weeks before he realized it was a hoax, supposedly, and got with the Notre Dame administration, and they went through an internal investigation, not telling anybody, supposedly because of the national championship game and not wanting to distract people from it.
I mean, I can understand that. I don't necessarily condone it. I understand covering up until the game's over, trying to eliminate some distractions. It's just a very strange situation. A friend, a supposed contact of Manti Te'o, is the alleged perpetrator of this hoax. His name is
Ronaya Tuisopoa.
Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so anyway, the friend, he
a
hasn't
man.
come right out and admitted it, but through channels, we're pretty sure he's the one who is running this on.
He's a man.
Yeah, he's a man pretending to be a woman, which is not unusual on the internet.
Do you think that he had to have a woman? Because apparently there were phone conversations back and forth.
There may have been a woman involved. I mean, I don't know about voice modulation these days. I'm not that up on it. Maybe you can make yourself sound like a woman. Maybe if you punch yourself in the gut or other places enough times, you can sound like a woman. I don't know.
Now, tell me, I'm going to read part of the report this is from ESPN.com. Tell me if any of this sounds a little suspicious in the timing and maybe in the wording. This is a direct quote from the woman who Ronaya supposedly confessed this to. She says, Ronaya, told me that Manti was not involved at all. He was a victim. The girlfriend was a lie. The accident was a lie. The leukemia was a lie, said the woman. He was crying. He was literally crying. He's like, I know what I have to do.
Yeah. It doesn't make any sense.
Does this come out maybe like somebody trying to, or maybe even getting paid to support Manti and his stance a little bit? Or does it look shady, or is this legit?
I don't know what to think. I don't know what's up, what's down with this. The only thing I can come back to is, what is the motivation for any side here? All right,
well, storylines win awards.
Right. Let's say that Manti Te'o is involved. There is a motivation there to do this thing. It gets him publicity. Probably without this story, he's not in the Heisman race. Really.
Well, no, his interception number as a linebacker probably kept him in it. He would not have gotten as many votes as he did.
Yeah, he definitely got more votes than he would have. But let's look at it from the other direction. Let's say Manti Te'o is just a victim in all of this. What's the motivation?
People are jerks.
I mean, is it really as simple as that?
It's as simple as that. People are jerks, and they're constantly looking for people who are gullible to trick. There's an entire show and I only know this because I listen to ESPN Radio, and they've had the producer and the host of this show. There's a show called Catfished on MTV. Apparently it's wildly popular, and that's all they do. They find these people who are in internet relationships. They get one person, and they do some investigation on the other and see if they're actually who they say they are.
Isn't that illegal?
I don't think it is. Is it illegal to impersonate somebody using fake pictures and fake accounts on the internet? I don't think that's illegal.
I almost wonder, is this whole thing an elaborate marketing scheme for that TV show? You just don't know at this point.
You're right.
You just
There's
don't
no
know.
telling.
Is MTV above that? No way. They're not above
definitely not. I've got 2 questions for you, and unless you have anything else to say, I think we might be able to move on from this.
It's just crazy, David.
It is. It's insane. The first question I have for you is, does this affect Manti Te'o's draft status?
Absolutely. You have to look at it from a number of angles. Number one, if he was complicit in it, he obviously has honesty issues, character issues. There are some things that would worry you.
Definitely.
If he wasn't involved, how does a guy get duped into this for so long? He has something loose that way, too.
But does that affect an NFL GM who's hiring him for his ability on the field?
First of all, let's look what happened in the title game. His stock already dropped as a result
Right.
of that.
Now, I'm not talking about his, because that he definitely dropped from that.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
talking about this incident by itself.
I think you can't look at them in isolation. I mean, you see what happened in the title game. Some GMs are probably on the fence now at this point.
That's got to make it drop, right?
GMs are on the fence about whether they really want him, and then after this happens, I think you say, no, there's too much baggage there.
Okay.
Never mind.
So he was originally projected before the national championship game, definitely top 5, maybe even the first pick in the draft.
No way.
Where does he go?
I'd say probably 3rd or 4th round at the highest.
See, I don't think so. I think middle of the 2nd round, somebody's going to take a chance on him. They're not going to put as much stock. NFL GMs still hire people who've been arrested, put in jail, served jail time, have spousal or domestic violence, marijuana uses.
I don't think he's that good of a player. I think they're going to figure that out.
He is a good nickel linebacker in a situation where you know they're going to throw. He can defend the pass, but he can't defend the run.
I think there are so many other good linebackers in this year's draft class that he's going to fall.
And he might. We never know. All right, here's my second question. We'll try to kind of end the Manti Te'o on this. I have heard some pretty clever Manti Te'o jokes.
Oh, yeah.
I cannot claim any of them as my own. Have you heard some?
I've heard some I've seen some good pictures, too.
Here's my question. Should we tell some of them? Because I don't think... Okay.
David, this is also a comedy show.
All right.
If you haven't noticed.
So, Andy, what is something that's very similar with Eddie Lacy and Manti Te'o's girlfriend?
The only thing I got is spin moves.
No.
I think that's not it.
Manti Te'o has not touched either of them.
All
right, you got one?
Ouch. I don't know if I have necessarily any jokes. Well, okay, I got one. It's not really a joke, but more of a statement,
right.
I guess. I think the thing we've learned this week is that girlfriends may have been the story of this year's national championship, but at least in the SEC, the girlfriends are real.
Ouch.
You know,
that's a good one. That's a good
They're
one.
real people.
Yeah. Who, by the way, she's covering the Super Bowl.
Yeah, she got an NFL job before A.J. McCarron.
She did. Or Manti Te'o.
Yeah, either one.
Okay, and here's my last one. I'm going to end on this one. I cannot claim this one as my own. I saw Mitch Miller put this on here. Mitch is a good friend of ours and of the show. Mitch, this one was hilarious. I'm going to repeat it on air. So, in honor of Manti Te'o's girlfriend, I'm eating an entire box of Samoas.
I did see one picture that made me laugh quite a bit. It was like a picture of, you know how athletes after a game will come up into the stands and talk to their family, and he was just kind of leaning over the rails, kind of like blowing kisses to the crowd, and somebody had photoshopped a blow-up dog.
Oh,
right
no.
It was really funny.
That's
funny
pretty good.
stuff.
That is good.
Yeah, so, all right. We'll lay off Manti Te'o now. Let's just say I think all SEC fans can appreciate this. There's a lot of times on this show that we're arguing back and forth about what team is better, but I think this clearly proves the SEC's football superiority. This would never happen to... I mean, SEC football players get into trouble a lot. It happens.
Yeah.
But I think I can safely say that we will never, ever hear about this happening to an SEC football player.
Yeah, I doubt that highly.
Yeah, so we'll take solace in that one. We're going to take a quick break. Got some other college football news to discuss after the break. Also, SEC basketball. Had an interesting week the past week. Got that stuff going on. Plenty more to come here on Outputting Our Coverage, so stick around. We'll be right back.
It's time for SEC preview. SEC, Big 10, Big 12, 12 can't count. SEC, college football robber barons. SEC, yeah, they're big, they're fast, they're strong. And Missouri and Texas A&M as well. Yeah, SEC preview. Here we go.
All right, welcome back in. It's not really an SEC preview. It just felt right to play that. I'm sorry.
And it's an awesome song. I mean, come on.
Old habits die hard. College football this week. Some pretty shocking news coming out. There was a lot of discussion about both of the prominent head coaches with the last name of Kelly possibly having NFL flirtations. Brian Kelly decided to stay put. Maybe right now he might be wishing differently with all the negative publicity he's getting. But the other Kelly, one by the name of...
R. Kelly?
Richard, possibly? Chip?
No.
What is Chip short for? Do we know?
No idea. I just would find it hilarious if his name was R. Kelly.
Can we look that up?
Yeah,
I'm going to keep talking.
I got you. You go ahead. I'll be our research department.
Because if it's really... I'm going to call him that from now on. I will call him R. Kelly. Watch out, he will pee on you. It will happen.
That would be awesome.
Drip, drip, drip. Anyways, Chip Kelly deciding this week, after stating a couple of weeks ago that he was going to stay at the University of Oregon, he accepted the Philadelphia Eagles job and really avoided a lot of the negative attention that may have come on that. Thanks to Manti Te'o, so he's thanking him as well for that one.
Definitely.
Big news, though. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Chip Kelly's offense works in the NFL. I mean, we're already seeing it a little bit with these college-style offenses and the remaining playoff teams, but Chip Kelly is really going to bring a different attitude.
I think so. He's cocky and arrogant because his name is Charles, unfortunately. We can call him C. Kelly.
That's not as good.
That's not as good. He's really cocky and arrogant for a guy who's really a late bloomer. I mean, he's 49. He's only had success in the last maybe 5 years. When he started in New Hampshire, he was a big offensive mind anyway, but it was in the passing game, which not a lot of people think about.
And it's in New Hampshire.
Which is, you got that going for you. Then at Oregon, he establishes this running threat. I think he can be offensively dynamic enough. I don't know if he can control a group of young guys making millions of dollars. I mean, I think he's one of those guys who...
He has kind of a standoffish personality.
He does, and I think he's going to come across more confrontational than a lot of coaches.
Yeah, I think you're right. Certainly the NFC East getting interesting. The Dallas Cowboys hiring Monty Kiffin as their defensive coordinator.
Definitely.
So Chip Kelly and Monty Kiffin will be squaring off again quite frequently.
It's even more of a confusing move for Kelly because he heard about Kiffin already.
He knew that.
You could have gotten rid or stayed away from having to play against Kiffin. Why would you go?
Yeah, I don't know. It's certainly an interesting move. You have to ask yourself, did Chip Kelly maybe find out something else about what might be coming Oregon's way from the NCAA? Is that what happened?
I think that Chip Kelly said, I'm going back to Oregon, and Eagles just bumped up their price.
Yeah, that may be. It may very well be. So certainly an interesting departure for the Eagles. And really this kind of brings us into a larger aspect of something I think you wrote a blog post about this week, Dave.
I did. If you go to outputtingourcoverage.wordpress.com, there is a new article entitled "The NFL is Getting Tired of Recycling Coaches." We talked a little bit last week about this. The NFL was terrible a couple years ago about just taking coaches. There would be 6 coaches fired, and there'd be no new coaches in the NFL. They would just all swap jobs, and I think the NFL is finally getting tired of that. The only coach who's gotten fired in the NFL this year who's still had a job somewhere else is Andy Reid, and I think he's more the exception than the rule. Winning all kinds of division titles. He's getting into the conference championship game, I think 6 times. He had over 600 winning percentage. The guy was pretty good. You got to give him his credit. But the Buffalo Bills hired Doug Marrone. Marrone has just in and out NFL experience. He's more of a college coach than anything. The Cleveland Browns hired Rod Chudzinski, who I had never heard of before.
All name
writing
team,
this,
though,
right?
For sure,
definitely. Chudzinski is right up there.
He sounds like one of those really fat guys that hangs out at your local diner and just drinks beer all day with a wife beater
and
on.
He might be that guy.
I
don't know. He coached the tight ends and the offense at Cleveland once or twice, so he's kind of coming back home. He's been at Cleveland before, but the one that I like is Chicago. Chicago went out and got Trestman, who if that doesn't make sense to a lot of you, it's because he's been coaching in the CFL for the last 8 years.
This is a little weird for me, David. We're about to praise something that was at least 50% Canadian.
Right.
Are you sure we can do this?
I can, because if you do go and read, there are some pretty nice Canadian jabs in the post.
As long as we're covering our bases, I'm fine with this.
We're covering our bases. This guy, though, apparently is just an offensive guru, and more specifically, a quarterback-minded coach. a lot of quarterbacks coming out of college and going into the draft hire him to get them ready for what they're going to see in the NFL. And I think Jay Cutler, more than anybody, probably would need a nice hand at quarterback.
Absolutely.
So I really like that move. And then, of course, this week with Chip Kelly and Bruce Arians getting hired, Arians had no head coaching experience until he had to take over this year in an interim basis for the Colts. So only one position refilled with an ex-NFL head coach.
It's very unusual.
What do you think about the trend?
I think maybe the NFL teams are paying a little bit more attention to college now and realizing that things are changing, and it helps when the people doing something different start having success. I mean, the NFL has always been a copycat league.
Definitely.
And it's kind of a paradox here because it seems like the NFL is trying something different by not hiring retreads, but really they're trying to duplicate what somebody else is doing too. They're just not as many people doing it.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to watch, but I think you are finally going to see the NFL start to change. I've heard people say it's just temporary and all that, but I think things opening up a little bit, and as far as the spread offense goes, is going to be a little bit more permanent than people think.
Right, and I'm just glad we're not going to see Norv Turner around for a little while.
Man. Yeah. Didn't he get hired as an offensive coordinator somewhere?
He did, but not as a head coach, so I don't have to think about him.
We're fine with that. Let's talk about Oregon, though, real quick.
Okay.
How badly does this impact them?
Oh, this hurts. I mean, you're already all the way into your recruiting battle. You thought you were square. I mean, all the coaches have been hired. Everybody's pretty settled who you probably would bring in as a coach. You're hurting. I mean, Colin Cowherd doesn't think so. He said, you got Chip Kelly. He was a no-name. Just go get somebody else. Well,
it doesn't always work like that.
I hate to tell you, they don't grow on trees. So it's going to be tough filling that void. You're probably going to have some decommits. You're definitely going to have some transfers. A lot of people came to Oregon to play in his system, and you really need to be careful with this hire because you've got to get somebody who's going to put in that same system.
Well, I think it's 99% sure they're going to hire their offense coordinator, Mark Helfrich.
Right, but does everybody have the same confidence in him? Because everybody knows Chip Kelly was calling the plays. He was calling the shots.
It's kind of like a situation with Bobby Petrino. You take him, great play caller, offense works great. You take him out of the equation and try to run the same offense. It happened at Auburn.
Right.
After he left, it happened this year at Arkansas. It doesn't work the same.
Yeah.
You take the guy out, it just doesn't work the same. You know who's happy right now?
Who's that?
Stanford.
Stanford is extremely happy not having
because
to mess with
the Pac-12
wide open
right now for Stanford to just take charge.
And hey, USC's fighting themselves, so
absolutely. I don't think USC's ready to contend next year.
No,
I mean really,
they dismantled this.
We'll have to see what happens with Oregon, but at this point, Stanford clear front runner to me.
I think so.
Yeah. So
hooray for physical pound it down your throat offense.
Yep. And as far as one more thing about the Eagles, I've heard mentioned this week that the Eagles possibly looking at Georgia's defensive coordinator, Todd Grantham, and I've even heard a few rumblings about Kirby Smart as the moving to the Eagles defensive coordinator. So that'll certainly be something to keep an eye on.
I think so. I think Kirby Smart would be a great hire. I think Georgia's defensive coach would be a great hire.
I think David Grantham has a little bit more NFL experience.
He does.
He came from the NFL to Georgia, so might be a little bit more of a natural fit there, but could be a little bit more turnover in the SEC. Might not be done yet, so be certainly something to pay attention to. Dave, you got anything else on this one?
No, I'm good on this one.
All right.
Let's hit a commercial real quick.
We're going to take a quick break. SEC basketball going strong. Some interesting happenings in the round ball world this past week. We'll break them down for you, make sure you're up to date so you can get into the basketball spirit as I have tried to do this week. So stick around. We'll be right back on Outputting Our Coverage. Welcome back in. This is the Outputting Your Coverage show. Our coverage. Everyone's coverage.
It's your show, listeners, so it's your coverage.
Yes. Speaking of coverage, it's time for us to cover SEC basketball. SEC conference play really going in earnest now. I think, most teams have played 3 SEC games now, so things are really getting going. Some pretty interesting games this past week.
I think so. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, let's start with the big one, Ole Miss, Missouri. We talked about it. We teased it on last week's show because we knew you were just all on the edges of your seats.
It was
waiting for it to happen, and it did happen.
Yes. Ole Miss, still unranked, by the way. Not really sure how that's happening. Against the number 10 at the time, Missouri Tigers. And wasn't even close.
No.
64-49, Ole Miss led pretty much all the way throughout. Just stifled that Missouri offense, and Missouri is putting up a ton of points when you go back and look closely at them. They've scored 90 points in like 7 of their games. They've scored 80 in another 5 or 6. They've got the 4th highest points per game in the entire country. So Ole Miss looks like they're legitimate. They've got a guy, M. Holloway, who's averaging 16 and 10 every game. That helps.
It's pretty good. Yeah. So, who do they got coming up here?
Ole Miss just got done beating Vandy. Unfortunately, it was in overtime, but they beat them by 10. They went 11-1.
You just don't know in basketball.
That's right.
You just don't know.
They went 11-1 in the overtime. They've got Arkansas coming up on the 19th, and they've got Tennessee on the 24th. They play at Auburn on the 26th. So you could argue a relatively easy upcoming schedule until they play Kentucky on the 29th.
Well,
so is Ole Miss legitimate? What do you think? Does the Missouri game by itself give them legitimacy?
I don't think so. I mean, I think overall the SEC this year is terrible.
Right.
So just beating Missouri, who is supposedly the best SEC team, doesn't mean a whole lot. I mean, it really depends on what you're referring to. Are they a legitimate SEC champion? Yes.
Okay.
Are they a legitimate team to go deep into the tournament? Probably not.
Well, let me ask you this. Will we know by February 13th? And I'll give you the list of games that they have in between now and then. They've got Arkansas, they've got Tennessee, at Auburn, and then here's where they hit the meat of their schedule. Home against Kentucky, at Florida, home against Mississippi State, at Missouri, at Texas A&M.
That's a pretty tough sled.
I think we'll find out who Ole Miss is.
We'll know by then.
Ole Miss right now leading the conference at 3-0 in conference play.
I really think what you're going to find is I think we're just going to end up with a mess of teams in the middle in SEC play this year. I don't think anybody's really going to separate themselves because I don't think anybody's really all that much better than everyone else.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'd like to talk about the next big game this week, Florida and Texas A&M. Florida showed me that they're ready to take the next step.
You think so?
Texas A&M came in. They had a pretty good schedule. We were going to try to find out who they were. I think this game shows more about Florida than it did about Texas A&M. Their defense was stifling. Texas A&M could get nothing done, and their offense definitely picked it up. I think Florida's ready to just take that next step. We'll definitely find out this week, January the 19th. I think that's tomorrow, isn't it?
It is. Yep.
They play at home against Mizzou. They play Ole Miss on the 2nd of February, Kentucky on the 12th. They play Missouri again, and then they've kind of got it easy the rest of the way. But I think Missouri or Florida is that team that's really going to take the reins atop the SEC. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're waiting for someone to separate themselves. A lot of people have been waiting for Kentucky to do that. They certainly, I think it's fair to say, have more talent than anyone else, but they just haven't been able to gel really this year. And I don't think Kentucky's going to get that separation. So maybe Florida's that team. I still think maybe Mizzou could be that team. I'm not so keen on Ole Miss, but I don't know. Personally, I don't really think anybody's going to separate themselves this year. I think you're going to see, maybe 3 or so teams up at the top that are kind of equal. Maybe each of them have 3 or so SEC losses, and down below that, everyone's kind of in a bunch,
Okay. What do you think about Missouri this last week? Do you think the Ole Miss kind of shakes them? Are they a legitimate team anymore?
I mean, again, I don't think any SEC team is truly legitimate as far as making a deep run into the tournament, but I still think, let's say, Florida, Ole Miss, Mizzou, and maybe Kentucky, you throw in there in the upper echelon of the SEC right now. They're all, in my mind, all equivalent.
You're not going to throw Auburn in there?
Not yet.
Okay. Auburn lost their first conference game this week, losing 88-80 against Arkansas.
Yeah, a tough loss. They were very close in that game.
Double overtime.
It was a very close game. Auburn picked up a big road win the weekend before at South Carolina. Big game coming up at home tomorrow against Kentucky. That really tells you who they are.
Definitely.
And a home game against Kentucky is not really that big of an advantage because Kentucky, the only SEC basketball school that we could say travels.
Right.
They actually bring fans to these games. They actually care.
They do.
That's a really tough test for Auburn. If they win that game, maybe I can start putting them up there. But right now, they're not quite there yet, in my mind.
All right, well, let's talk about Kentucky then. Kentucky really, across the board, ranks pretty highly in every category nationally. They're 30th in points per game, 45th in rebounds, 41st in assists, 18th in field goal percentage. They're shooting the ball pretty well. What is their weakness? Why are they not doing so well?
I think eventually, with the strategy of John Calipari, bringing in these one-and-done guys each year, some years it's going to work, some years they're going to gel, and some years they aren't.
Right.
I think that's what it comes down to. Basketball is, as much as you'd like to think that if you just had the best player on the floor, you're going to win, once you get up to the upper levels, teamwork really does matter.
It does.
You know, and you have to have an identity. You have to be on the same page, and sometimes you get that with the one-and-done guys, and sometimes you don't.
Have we put Kentucky on too high a pedestal? They're 11-5 overall. They're 2-1 in the SEC, and we're talking about them like they're out of the race. Have we put them on too high a pedestal?
I mean, we as SEC fans expect them to represent us well. I mean, they're pretty much all we got most of the time.
Right.
You know, so, and certainly their fans are not pleased with this.
Well,
it's all relative.
3 years ago, Kentucky was a 500 basketball team.
Right, but let's put it this way. When you make a Nick Saban level of investment into your basketball program, you expect to be in the hunt every year.
That's true.
I mean, it's one thing when you're paying Billy Gillispie, a standard amount, but
right.
Once you bring in a big gun like John Calipari and you pay him like a big gun,
yeah,
you got to be there every year.
True. That's true. All right, Kentucky's remaining schedule, they've got at Auburn, at Alabama, home against LSU, at Ole Miss, at Texas A&M, who's already beaten them once at home, against South Carolina, Auburn, Florida. They play Missouri, and they play Florida at the end of the year. What do you see for the rest of the year for the Wildcats? Do they get it together?
The next couple of weeks are going to be tough for them.
They are.
I think the Auburn game is going to be a tough game. The Alabama game is going to be a tough game. Alabama's found themselves a little bit in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Ole Miss tough. Texas A&M tough. South Carolina. I mean, these teams are all equal any given week. I think you may see Kentucky pick up another 2 losses in the next couple of weeks.
I think you might see another 2 losses just in the fact they play Florida twice before the end of the year. So really interesting to keep an eye on them. What about Texas A&M? Texas A&M, we talked about them a little bit. They got demolished by Florida. It was kind of embarrassing on national TV. This was supposed to be their come-out game or coming-out party. What do you see from Texas A&M? Do they rebound from this, or is this it for them?
I mean, when you lose that badly to a team that, in my opinion, is not that much better than everyone else,
right?
It's something to worry about. I don't know. I mean, they haven't been that impressive this year, losing to some pretty bad teams. What is SLU? What school is that? When you lose 70-49 to them?
St. Louis.
Yeah. I mean, a traditional basketball school, but
the Billikens.
Not that great of a team this year.
Right. They've also lost to Oklahoma by 10, and they lost to Southern University Jaguars by 2.
That's bad.
Some of their wins, they beat Houston Baptist, Army. They beat Texas A&M CC Islanders, Stephen F. Austin, Houston, Northwestern, and that's not the Northwestern you're thinking of. That's the Division II Northwestern. So not a whole lot of impressive victories on that slate.
I'm not buying in.
Yeah,
I'm not buying into that.
I'm with you. I think Texas A&M ends up in the bottom of the bracket or bottom of the standings once this is all said and done. Let's talk about Auburn. Auburn, really tough loss that we already talked about in double overtime. Their only other losses, I mean, they're pretty legitimate. You lost by 2 to the number 12 team in the country, Illinois. Lost to DePaul, lost to Rhode Island, both of the in double overtime again. Both of those are basketball schools. Lost by 1 to Boston College, and all these were early in the season.
Right.
They really started to kind of find themselves with wins against Florida State. They beat LSU and South Carolina. What do you see for Auburn? Are they getting things together? Or?
I think they are a little bit. They had some young guys come in this year that have taken a little while to get going. Shaquille Johnson, one of those guys who is the only freshman who's worked his way into the starting lineup at this point, certainly providing some support there. But you have a good mix of young guys, and then you have some older guys like Frankie Sullivan, who's really doing some nice things right now, and then one of my favorite guys of all time, Rob Chubb. Just
gotta love the Chubbster.
The name. He's really he's turned himself from your white boy coming into the game when you're up by 20 to a legitimate post threat. I mean, kudos to him for that one. But I think things are gelling at the right time. I don't know if they're ready to, be a tournament team at this point. I think they're still maybe a year or so away from that.
Maybe an NIT?
I think they could get into NIT. And, I think they can certainly have a winning SEC record this year, which would be a lot better than what has happened in the past years.
Oh, definitely. So, I think Auburn's the biggest thing they have working against them is their schedule. Really tough down the road. They play, as you mentioned, at home this week against Kentucky. They're at Vandy, who's terrible this year, but then they play against Ole Miss. They've got Mizzou, Alabama, Kentucky, Florida, A&M, Ole Miss again, Alabama again. A really tough schedule. You think they can be over 500?
I think that's gonna be the dividing line for them. My heart tells me yes. I don't know. I'm trying not to believe too much in Auburn basketball because we've been burned the last couple of years. But I really am seeing some nice things, and especially some nice effort and just not giving up in games, which has really been a hallmark of the past few years.
Right. And then we'll talk about the Crimson Tide of Alabama kind of finding themselves in the last 2 weeks. They beat Tennessee by 3. They crushed Mississippi State 75-43. But they're kind of a bipolar team. They got drubbed by Missouri, 84-68. They lost to Tulane and Mercer. They lost to Cincinnati, which put them on a 3-game skid against VCU and Dayton Flyers. I don't really know what to think about Alabama. Their strength is always going to be defense. Offensively, they rank worst in almost every category in the entire country in points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game. They're at least 205th or higher. So not doing so well on offense, but is the defense enough for the Tide?
I don't know. I mean, can you say in defense or in college basketball that defense wins championships? I don't know if that's so true. I mean, yeah, I think you got to have some scorers at the end of the day, and they have a very talented. I believe he's a freshman, Trevor Relaford. He was a big get in recruiting, but one guy's not enough. You got to have a couple of guys, and I think coming down the stretch, Alabama may struggle a little bit this year.
I think you're right, and I think they just don't have enough depth on the bench. They try to get some guys in to get some rest. They've either gotten hurt or they're suspended, or the coach just doesn't like the effort that he's seeing. You've seen this 3 or 4 times this year already, where the head coach is coming out and saying the effort's not there, and you don't typically get that from a Crimson Tide team, and that's just it's unfortunate. But they've got a pretty difficult schedule coming up. They've got home against A&M, home against Kentucky. They play Tennessee again. They play a game at Auburn February the 6th. Then it gets a little easier until they have to play at Florida March the 2nd and at Ole Miss March the 5th. That'll really kind of, I think in that week we'll know who Alabama is.
Yep, so lots of interesting SEC basketball action coming up. Some big games tomorrow to pay attention to if you don't have anything going on. And of course you don't, because it's not college football season. So you can definitely pay attention to those. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to do what we do best, freestyling.
Gotta love it.
So you want to stick around for that. You never know what we might say. Could be offensive.
Probably going to be offensive.
Most likely will be offensive. So you want to stick around for that one here on the Outputting Our Coverage Show.
I hopped up the plane at LAX with a dream, my cardigan. Welcome to the land of fame excess. Am I gonna fit in? Jumped in the cab, here I am for the first time. Look to my right and I see the Hollywood sign. This is all so crazy. Everybody seems so famous. My tummy's turning and I'm feeling kinda homesick. Too much pressure and I'm nervous. That's when the taxi man turned on the radio and a Jay-Z song was on. And the Jay-Z song was on. And the Jay-Z song was on. So I put my hands up to play my song. The butterflies fly away.
You gotta wait until they drop the beat. until it's just her by herself. You just gotta wait until that part.
I just love that song. It's so quintessentially American. We've had some weather mishaps here in the North Alabama area over the past week or so, and that song's just like a ray of sunshine straight to my heart every day.
That's weird.
Let's move on.
Yeah. How about the NFL? You want to talk NFL a little bit?
Okay. We'll talk about the NFL. You listeners know my feelings on the NFL, but we'll do it because I know some of them like it.
And I like the NFL. My rooting interest was with the Seahawks. Valiant effort. They almost came up. I thought they were going to win it. 30 seconds left. They score a touchdown to go up by 2, I think it was. With 30 seconds, they partied like they had already won it. Unfortunately, Matt Ryan on the other end made 2 huge clutch throws. He was kind of on again, off again last week. Takes him down. So at this point, my rooting interest is for a Harbaugh Bowl. Yeah, I think that would be interesting. I think it'd be neat to see the 49ers with head coach who just recently was at Stanford, Jim Harbaugh, face his brother John Harbaugh with the Baltimore Ravens, Ray Lewis in his last year. I think the storylines are really rich there. You also have Colin Kaepernick in his first year. They'd really kind of tee off against each other. But first, we have the divisional matchups. San Francisco has to travel to Atlanta, where Atlanta is actually like an 8-point underdog. What do you think? Have you kept up with this at all?
I mean, traditionally, the Falcons not very good performers in playoff games. You saw they almost gave it away last week. I can get behind a San Francisco-Baltimore Super Bowl. I really don't want to see the Patriots in it. I feel like I've been there, done that.
Right.
But I feel like, I don't know. We may end up seeing that. I got a feeling Atlanta's going to get beat this week.
Okay. I'm going to make some bold predictions. I think I'm on each of these games real quick. I think Atlanta stops Colin Kaepernick's running ability. I think their zone read defense is pretty impressive. They faced it against Russell Wilson. Do you know how many times Russell Wilson ran the ball on the read option last week?
I do not.
0.
Wow, that's impressive.
They made him give up the ball. Now the problem for Atlanta is that Frank Gore is a tremendous down the hill runner.
Yep.
Colin Kaepernick can throw the ball. He's an underrated passer. I think San Francisco probably wins this one. On the other edge, New England is. A lot of people are going to be betting on them. They think they've got the upper hand. However, Baltimore historically, at least in the last 3 or 4 years, done very well against New England. They are not going to be afraid of Tom Brady and the Patriots as they walk in. The Patriots have lost Gronkowski. Joe Flacco is playing out of his mind in the last 2 weeks and typically plays pretty well against the New England defense. Baltimore's defense a little banged up, a little old, a little worse for wear. A lot of people are talking about Ray Lewis and how he might be too old to play the game. Interesting fact, Baltimore without Ray Lewis. You know their record?
I do not. Is it better?
They're 5-4 without Ray Lewis.
All time?
No, this year. They're 7-1 when he's playing in the game. So the Ravens, I think, much better whether Ray Lewis is on the field as not necessarily a decoy, but somebody to run away from. I really think the Ravens have a shot. I'm actually going to go Ravens and 49ers. I think they're going to meet in the Super Bowl.
Who wins? Who's your pick?
I think the 49ers win it. I think they're the more complete team. I'd get behind them in a heartbeat. And I'd love to see a college coach jump right up into the ranks.
I think I'm on board with you. If I had to pick right now, going with the 49ers, echoes of Joe Montana, Steve Young, those guys we grew up with.
Which everybody with money who might be placing it on a team this week, which we don't condone, what we have just done is called the kiss of death for San Francisco.
Yes.
It means they're going to lose.
Out.
They're going to lose by 20 against Atlanta.
It's like a cursed Sports Illustrated cover.
Right.
So, anyways, that's all the time we got this week on Outputting Our Coverage. We'll be back next week. So
here's your favorite song
to tune in. Here it comes.